Okay, great. So this morning, I got to ride in the lift car, the self-driving vehicle, and it's coming, and it got me thinking about AI kind of eating the world, or eating everybody's job. And then I got an email from my son, Adam, who has this blog, and he kind of shoots off about whatever he comes up with. And today's blog was, what if AI just takes all of our jobs? So just think about that. What then? AI does all the work, so then we get to what? We get to goof off, or we get to think about what the world might look like later, or we get to reinvent things, or to invent beyond where we are today. So it kind of got me thinking. I'll get around to the topic here, VCs in the ICO world, but I want everybody to start thinking this way because it is going to be really interesting. That driver's job and my job and all, actually it'll be great, all of those government jobs will probably be replaced by AI. And then what? Then how do we kind of start looking at the world? I think that's going to be really fun, and it's a great way to start the year. Here's a question. On your list of things to do for the year, I mean, it's the beginning of the year, right? On your list of things to do for the year, my recommendation is put two things on there. One is, how am I going to reinvent myself when my job is replaced by AI? That would be number one. Number two would be actually number two will come a little later. I'll talk about that a little later. So now, VCs in an ICO world. It's kind of interesting. It was more interesting in Q3 of 2017 when there was more money that went into ICOs than was invested in venture capital at the time. But there is something happening here. The world is decentralizing. Bitcoin has brought on the decentralization of everything. And it's decentralizing, and that means it's going to decentralize venture capital, which means that the entrepreneur will be that much closer to the money, and that the venture capitalists, which were centralized locations for money, will have to start thinking more decentralized. Fortunately, we've been able to create the Draper Venture Network, and we're spread out all over the world, and that I think will benefit us in the future, because I do think that this whole combination of the entrepreneur and the money and how those things connect with one another, I think that there's something that is going to change in a big way. But when ICOs, we were lucky, we backed the two first really big ICOs. We backed Tezos and Bancor. And, sorry, this is from that fire. Somehow it got into my lungs, and I've been choking for about the last 2 months. Since I backed those two ICOs, we got flooded with every ICO under the sun. We got, I think it was something like 10,000 ICOs came into Draper Associates. And I was looking at them in a couple of different ways, but one thing I was really thinking about was how should I evaluate these? And I thought, well, I have to evaluate them the same way I evaluate everything. I looked at the people behind them, and I said, how motivated and driven are you for this ICO? And does the ICO have a purpose? And then I thought, wait a second. Excuse me. As a venture capitalist, how do I align best with you? And it turns out that these ICOs created new pies. There's the pie of ownership in the company, and that's the one that we venture capitalists have always backed. And then there's the pie of the ICO itself, and who owns how much of that, who owns what coins. And then there's a pie of like, there's this new money that shows up. Where does that go? And so what we did with this was we just aligned ourselves with the entrepreneur. We said, well, if we're investing here, we're going to buy into your company, we're going to buy into the ICO, and we're going to buy into whatever money comes out of that ICO. And I think that brought us in alignment, and we felt great about it, and the entrepreneurs felt great about it. So that they didn't like sell us into the company and then go off and make the token really successful, or sell us into the token and just use that money to promote their company, and we wouldn't be aligned. So alignment's very important, I think. The other thing I wanted to get into is, what does Bitcoin mean? And yeah, sure, this vision that a lot of us have is not happening overnight. It is not going to be here overnight, which is why people always come to me and say, well, you have that prediction, 250,000 per Bitcoin in 2022. How about this year? I look at them and I go, God, really? This year? There's so much that has to happen before we all jump in and realize that this is just a better way to operate. This is just better money. It's a better way to think about the world. It's a better way to drive an economy. All those things have to happen. But before that happens, the consumer has to realize that this is 10 times more valuable than what they're doing right now. So right now they're looking and going, hey, I got dollars, so why? Who cares? Now, of course, if you're in Venezuela and you've got bolivars, that's a little different. You do start thinking, well, hey, maybe the Bitcoin, no matter if Bitcoin could drop from 20,000 down to 3,000, that's probably done better than the bolivar has over the same period of time in Venezuela. And if you're in Argentina, the peso is also always at risk. In Nigeria, the naira is always at risk. So those currencies are going to be, those are the countries that are going to be the first to say, hey, we got to really adopt it, and drive it forward. But Bitcoin and all the associated technologies that have come with Bitcoin are going to really transform the world. They are going to transform every piece of every industry that we've ever had, and they're going to create new industries that none of us have ever imagined. Imagine this. Okay, well, there's Bitcoin, and of course that's going to transform banking and commerce and finance. Oh, by the way, the banks are realizing that this is going to change, and they're either doing one of two things. They're either saying, no, we're not going to let anybody have a Bitcoin. Anybody who's doing anything with Bitcoin, they don't get a bank account, They're doing that kind of thing, or they're embracing it and saying, well, how can we best apply Bitcoin to our to the services that we already provide? I think to push back against the banks that are sort of going, no Bitcoin, I think you go to the retailer. So this is my ask for all of you. Every time you go to buy anything, ask, do you take Bitcoin? Just put it in the retailer's head. Eventually, they're all going to take Bitcoin, and eventually it's going to be really easy to buy things with Bitcoin. And then we are not going to any longer need to put up with this sort of fight against progress. So just ask every time you're in a retail store, anytime you're at a, in a Lyft or Uber, hey, do you guys take Bitcoin? Just get the conversation going and think that way. So that's my ask. One other thing I want to hit on is you've got Bitcoin. That's a transformative technology for commerce and for finance and banking. Then you've got the blockchain, and that's the perfect ledger, and no longer will you need the accountant to do what he's doing now. He can do new things, he or she. And then you've got this, these smart contracts that we can only imagine what is going to be capable with a smart contract. Here you are in Las Vegas. I think people are going to start thinking about smart contracts in bets. I mean, I would think Las Vegas will be the first to say, hey, we're building smart contracts into everything we do here. They would love it. You create a bet, you put it on the blockchain, it's done, the winner takes it, loser doesn't, and that could really transform gaming. But then if you apply all of the cool things that are happening in data, big data, deep learning, artificial intelligence, all those things that are happening in data, and you combine those with all the things that are happening with Bitcoin, you're going to go after some industries that are much, much bigger than anything that the internet even touched. Internet went after gaming and entertainment, communications, media, but this is going to go after banking, insurance, and I'll give you an example of healthcare. I believe your healthcare, you're going to hold on to your healthcare data, you're going to put it up into the cloud, and you're going to say, here are my medical records, here are my genetic history, here are my blood test results, and here are my Fitbit results, and here's what I had for breakfast, and here's where I've traveled, and here's who I've met. All of a sudden, that cloud has more data about you than any doctor could possibly have. Doctor couldn't ask enough questions. And so their diagnosis is going to be more important or more valuable than the doctor's diagnosis. We have a company called Cloudmetics. They actually took the doctor test. They used AI, took the doctor test. Average score is a 76. You get to be a doctor at a 70. Cloudmetics scored an 86, and when combined with a doctor, scored a 91. We're going to get a lot better results because of this. So many problems happen in the hospital because the data's not good enough. They don't know where you've been. And then the last thing I'm going to end with is where all these technologies now can transform governments. Governments are going to be decentralized, which means that they are going to be able to compete across borders for you. Most of what government does is sort of like insurance, right? It's your healthcare insurance and your pension and your Social Security and your all the secure things. That's where most of the government money goes to, defense. Well, if you can choose the government that's right for you, those governments are going to all have to compete for you. They're going to have to do a better job. And we're going to get the kind of service in government that we get in the computer world or in the chair world or in the self-driving car world. We're going to get people who are really competing for us. Governments who control all that they purvey, they are going to go the way of the buggy whip and the dinosaur. So I am very optimistic about our future. We are going to have much better healthcare, we're going to have much better banking, and we're going to have much better government. So, and to finish, we're going to have much better venture capitalists. Thank you.